All right, here we are, our Exploring New Earth here on May 12th. I'm Reverend Dr. David Brown, joined with uh, Re- uh, 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 Dr. Rebecca Esterson, um, who is currently Dean of the Swedenborgian Center for Swedenborgian Studies. And so it's an opportunity for those that don't know much about seminary education or how that works, maybe getting to learn a little bit more about our tradition. I wanted to turn this over now to Rebecca to just give a little bit of a context and history as to how she arrived where she is and a little bit about yeah, the journey thus far.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, David, for inviting me to Exploring New Earth. What a wonderful title for a program coming out of the Wayfarers Chapel community. I'm here in Berkeley, California, with the beautiful East Bay Hills outside my window, in my office at the Center for Swedenborgian Studies. We are located on what we like to call in Berkeley Holy Hill, which is this consortium of seminaries and centers for religious studies in different religious traditions that under this umbrella heading of the Graduate Theological Union, or the GTU. Um, and how I got here is a long story, um, but briefly, I grew up Swedenborgian. My father is a Swedenborgian minister, and I grew up in a Swedenborgian community outside of Philadelphia. My family traces back actually through my mom's side, back 7 or 8 generations in the tradition. And the family lore on my side of the family is that our ancestors, the Grant family, who lived on the banks of the Ohio River, would actually host Johnny Appleseed for a few months out of the year as he was traversing the country, and that's how we came to this religious tradition, was through Johnny Appleseed and his missionizing efforts. I don't know how to trace the whether or not that's fact or fiction, but that's the lore that my aunt, who was our family historian, believed to be the case. So been in it for a long time on my mom's side of the family. Um, I grew up in a particular denomination of the Swedenborgian tradition, the General Church. But I switched denominations and landed into the Swedenborgian Church of North America, popularly known as Convention, when I was in grad school. I ended up at Harvard Divinity School studying theological education, and I didn't know when I arrived on campus that there was a Swedenborg chapel right there in the heart of Harvard's campus. And it didn't take me long to get to know the pastor there, F. Bob Toffel, and his Harvard intern, Sarah Buteau. And the two of them really took me by hand and welcomed me into the community there. And it very quickly became my spiritual family there in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I lived for 18 or 19 years while I was in grad school and starting my family. Um, Eventually, I was contacted that there was a search for junior faculty here in the seminary here in Berkeley, and I jumped at the opportunity and landed here. My family moved across the country from Massachusetts to California in 2015. Been on the faculty here ever since, and couldn't be uh, more thankful and honored to be a part of the community here, in which we have this incredible consortium where we have colleagues and students who are Baha'i, Muslim, Jewish, Catholic, Protestant, Buddhist, Hindu. It's an incredible interreligious community here on Holy Hill. And then we got a Center for Swedenborgian Studies. So not only do we get to be a part of this wonderful interreligious conversation, but we get to be authentically us as we do it. We get to bring our tradition with its rich theology and practice uh, into this global conversation that we have here at the GTU. So it's a very exciting place for me professionally to be. I'm very comfortable. I'm most comfortable actually in interreligious contexts. I get very excited by religious diversity, religious pluralism. Um, in fact, I'm married to an observant Jewish man, so our home is interreligious as well. So you can see that I seek out these kinds of environments when different kinds of religious vocabularies, religious practices are in play. It's very exciting to me. So that's a little bit about how I got here.
Sure, yeah, thank you for that. And I did not know about that connection to John Chapman, Johnny
John
Appleseed.
Chapman, yeah.
And I think a fun little thing about that is his name comes up quite a bit. Of course, when you say the word Swedenborgian and people have no context for it, and then people just automatically think that Johnny Appleseed was like folklore,
Right,
like Paul Bunyan and his blue
right,
ox or something.
right.
It's like
Nope,
no.
he's a real guy.
Yeah, so that's yeah, that's an amazing piece of history.
Mm.
And yeah, it is I'll just share a tiny bit of the underscore how much I think the Graduate Theological Union has become more widely known because I entered there in fall 2000, and then when 9/11 hit, this whole topic about theology mattering started some kind of went up the ladder a bit, and so now when I do visit the Bay Area, I see the signage on the freeways. So that's quite prominent for Graduate Theological Union. So it's great to have those communities, and I know our theology very much sometimes I say plays well with others
It
in terms
does.
of and you I don't know the quote verbatim, but you might have it. It's about how heaven gets perfected through the diversity of people. Something I'm paraphrasing a little.
Diversity is the perfection of heaven. I think it's, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's really just a great thing to have, and glad that you're there and the dean and get to see that. So I want to dig in a little bit about so you've been in this field for a while and wanted to kind of get your take on kind of the evolution, the journey and the challenges of yeah, seminary education and graduate level theology, just kind of broad brushstrokes because I know the interest is out there. And I know there's real world challenges. We're facing all kinds of things presently with inflation and the real estate. And I know just some from the time that I was there, 2000, 2004, to where we are now,
Yeah,
completely different experience.
yeah,
I mean, I was there where you still could live on campus and go
yeah,
to classes and
right.
have the in-person experience. And I know that's quite different presently. So I want to kind of
Yeah.
open it up for you to just give your insights on what you've witnessed and where the state of the modern seminarian is.
Mhm. Yeah, so much change is happening everywhere that you find graduate theological education. Everywhere that there's a seminary, that there's a department of religion or theology, you can be guaranteed major change is happening, even just in the last 10 years since we moved here 11 years ago now. Um, so much change has happened. Right. When I got to campus here at the Pacific School of Religion, where in the building I'm in right now, there was a fully functioning cafeteria, 3 meals a day. There were multiple dorms. There was a chapel that had regular weekly activities. It's different now. And it's not just COVID, although certainly COVID triggered a lot of um, or we'll say whatever instability was in the system, COVID kind of was a catalyst for the major change that was on the horizon. Um, yeah, here at the Graduate Theological Union, again, we have a consortium of many different schools, many different graduate schools, and different centers and affiliates of the GTU are at play. So we have a front row seat to the changing landscape of graduate theological education. Every single school in our consortium, like every other school out there, is having an earthquake moment. Part of it's COVID and what COVID did to us pedagogically and financially and socially, all of it. But it's also the state of churches in our world with declining attendance, traditional forms of worship morphing into other things. Um, it's also just our national climate with its divisions and its polarities. There's a lot at play. But the reality is that a lot of seminaries, a lot of schools are trying to find new ground, exploring new earth. Um, so what's happening is a lot of schools are reaffiliating in different ways. They might be moving campuses. They might be partnering with another school, uncoupling and making new affiliations with a university. Or if they are already affiliated with the university might be pulling them in and severing other kinds of relationships, other kinds of affiliations. That's happening. Everybody's trying to find new footing in a rapidly changing landscape. Our little seminary, we're a faculty of two full-time faculty plus a emeritus faculty member, my predecessor, Jim Lawrence. We're pretty stable for our size and what we do. We're in pretty good shape, but we rely on relationships with other institutions heavily. And those relationships are, we're kind of waiting to see how the terrain stabilizes when the present earthquake is over. And I'll just share an experience about 2 years ago, maybe a little more than 2 years ago, when I heard about Wayfarers Chapel and the precariousness of the ground under the chapel. And it was a time when the instability of the landscape of these institutions I'm talking about was really affecting me. And I was worried about the future of theological education. It was also a time when my mother-in-law was facing a terminal diagnosis. And I had this image of this glass chapel on a cliff, almost falling into the sea, right? Precariously perched, ready to fall into the sea. And it felt like this iconic archetypal image for everything in my life that was precious and beautiful and precariously perched. It felt like so many things were teetering. And so I just carried Wayfarers in my mind and in my heart as like um, a symbol for so many things that were unstable. And so I continue to feel that way about Wayfarers. And as it's been very carefully disassembled and preserved and protected, and with this hope of being reborn, I bring that with me. My mother-in-law has since died and passed on into the next phase of her being. Um, and I await to see what happens next um, with all of these other institutions that I love and cherish. And I hope we can all arrive on new ground together in the coming decade, century, who knows?
Yeah, beautiful and great sentiment. I think you touched upon, I mean, these themes of I think COVID in 2020, and here we have kind of the build up to it. It was what we use for perfect vision, right? You see things clearly and well at 2020, and then perhaps that was happening at another level where all the instabilities structurally and all kinds
Yeah.
of, I mean, even relations. I mean, a lot of things
Yeah.
shifted quickly, and
Yeah.
I think we're still trying to figure out a bit
We
where
are.
this ends, or if it does end, or I think that's the other thing about this from the spiritual perspective is how challenging, these crises times are also opportunities to really get into perhaps some of that deeper work that may have been held up with some of the structures that we, that were holding things in place.
Yeah.
Um, and I'll share real quick since you mentioned that vision. I was I had Sage on Sunday. These two were, I think both. Well, at least you were were you there, Michael? I know. Um, Sage was saying she had a dream, and
Mm.
it was me helping her on like some almost like a watercraft where we were going to some other version of Wayfarers that was floating on water, and
Hmm.
and it was an interesting thing. I mean, this whole thing, t kind of tying that together. The more that we've been in conversation with people over the years about what's happening to us, it's brought this whole ecological component into play, and it started more conversations too at some of the highest levels. This is someone having a from the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation talking with someone who's high up with the Guggenheim, and it was all about a new form of architecture, which actually starts by studying the geotechnology so that you
Hmm.
have a better understanding of what's beneath you. Because if you don't have
Okay.
that, you can't really do too much that's
Yeah.
solid above. And yeah, so it
Wow.
affected
What a
us.
great correspondential image, right? How to build your house on solid earth. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's good scriptural foundation for
Yeah.
one as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of things. And then when we're talking about climate change, we're talking about coastal communities. I mean, this is happening here in unprecedented ways. I mean, this is the largest, fastest moving landslide in all of North America. It's been happening in other parts of the country, other, I mean, around the world. We got similar things happening with just how it changes. The some areas are going through drought and others are getting flooded. So dealing with that and the sense of stability is also a different thing. And as we're talking, I was just thinking about people looking at the images that were taken of Earth from the last time and in orbit went around, and what it looks like from just a few days ago with the latest
Mm.
version,
Oh,
and
they
how
could
much.
see a change.
Yeah, I mean, you could, who knows if it's the cameras, the quality, but you definitely, if you put them side by side,
Mm.
it doesn't look like we've been doing fantastic things in those
Uh,
decades that you
wow.
can you can see there. But so I wanted to also just before we open this up, just kind of get into one other area, which is um, well, it's around the student life. Uh, I imagine that there are people, because I mean, I've been blessed in my ministry here to see and witness people, I mean, absolutely have conversion moment experiences where they're like, I don't know what to do with this. Where do I go? And um, so I guess my question is, what advice might you give to someone who's con discerning a call
Mm.
and they're considering um, making a more formal step?
Mm.
What might be your guidance and or cautions and or
Mm.
experience in the present educational landscape from your
Yeah.
perspective?
Right. Yeah. Wow. Ministry looks a little different today than it did in, our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation, and uh, folks need to be flexible. um, and think about their options. And we often encourage people, if they have a calling to ministry, to um, consider uh, a range of ways of making this work for them. And that could be being bivocational. You might have a calling to ministry alongside other kinds of callings or other kinds of work. But there are certainly careers in ministry today that could be a more traditional path of going in and serving a church in parish ministry. But a lot of folks today are considering chaplaincy. Chaplaincy can be a very good career for people who have a calling in ministry. And a way to try that out is to do a unit of CPE. We were just talking about CPE together before we hit the record button. I'm just finishing this week a unit of CPE, clinical pastoral education. Um, and so many of our students are considering a chaplaincy as part of their path in one way or another. Whether or not they go into parish ministry, there may be some form of chaplaincy that they think about um, adding to their portfolio. Um, but there are other reasons to study theology, and a lot of people come here and have a calling to study, and they don't necessarily know exactly where it's taking them, but they know that this is something they want as part of their life journey, and it can be certainly very world opening, world changing. It certainly was for me studying religion in graduate school was everything. Um, to me. It really ch changed the trajectory of my life. And I want to encourage and support others who have a calling to do this, to study, to really go deep with theological ideas, with practical theology. Um, there are many ways to do this, many tracks of study. Um, yeah, and I often talk about the call of Abraham in Genesis. Um, Genesis 12 opens with Abram's being called to leave the land of his father and come to a land that I promised you. Um, and very often folks have a kind of a real sense of calling, a real sense of I am being pulled by forces beyond me to enter into ministry training. Um, and and to listen to that voice within you that is pulling, that's inspiring. um, it's interesting that story is immediately followed by a story of famine, of drought, of starvation. So to caution that just because you have this mountaintop moment of calling and closeness to divinity, to God, and to purpose, it could be very quickly followed by a sense of confusion and doubt and a kind of spiritual wilderness phase or spiritual drought. And to know that that's normal, that it's the experience of calling isn't all peak moments. It can also be a thirst, can come with a sense of thirst or hunger or depletion, that needing to find sustenance. Um, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And I think that's I think that's part of the process and maybe part of the hurdle as well. Um, Two things, I guess. One being that when you're in the formational process, let's say you're finally wanting to formally take a class and learn something, a lot of those times it can be you have to let go of certain ideas and concepts and beliefs before before you can kind of reformulate something new that's a bit more lasting, and that's certainly a part of the process.
Yeah.
Um, and I think part of what this message is too, the exploring new earth is also a connective bridge because it isn't fully formed yet, and there is this in between space that is really is a part of the journey where it's not. here but not yet. That whole component. Um, and then
I could just describe our options for students in case there's
sure.
somebody who finds this video and wants to know, practically speaking, what we do. So just very quickly, the Center for Swedenborgian Studies, our legal name is the New Church Theological School. So if you hear that name, it's just another name for the Center for Swedenborgian Studies. We do not grant degrees. We are not a degree granting institution. We grant a certificate in Swedenborgian Ministry Studies that is meant to complement a master's degree that you would get from an accredited theological school. So all of our students who are training for ministry will be getting a master's degree from one of a few different options for their master's degree or their MDiv. Um, so our students who are, again, training for ministry will get, and we will partner with them to find the right school for them and to work out a curriculum with that school so that they can have our classes in Swedenborgian Studies folded into their degree. And that journey, they'll come out on the other side, also having done some other denominational requirements for ministry training and become ordained ministers. A lot of our students are studying with us, however, not for ordination, but for other reasons. They might be just doing an academic journey, studying religion or wanting a certificate in Swedenborgian studies for other vocational reasons. We have about half of our certificate students are training for ministry and about half are doing other things. Some of them are teachers or have other occupations, but they want this certificate to enrich what they're doing already in their work. And then we have a lot of folks who are at the GTU consortium somewhere doing a PhD or an MA in one of the schools here and want to also to study Swedenborgian studies. So we have a lot of GTU students who are taking our classes in Swedenborgian studies as part of another academic or professional journey. So we have folks doing a lot of different things, different kinds of journeys that
And
study. Yeah.
just to clarify for anyone out there, that there are opportunities if you are somewhere at an accredited, say it's a Master of Divinity program or some master's program that you do. There still is the hybrid option where you can do some things, courses online through the Center for Swedenborgian
Yes,
Studies.
all of our classes are hybrid, with one exception. Our January term class is in person only. But everything else we do is hybrid. So we'll often have a mix of students in the classroom and online. We're getting pretty good at doing that. It took some time to really master that as a method of teaching, but yes,
Hmm.
yeah. We have students from all over the world. In fact, we're about to graduate a student from Accra in Ghana. He'll be our valedictorian this summer at convention. So
Oh, wow. Exciting.
yeah.
Okay, well, we've gotten through the good portion of the material one to cover and want to open it up for questions that you might have, Stephanie, or if Michael's still on there, or even you, Rudy.
I don't have any questions, but that was really informative. Thanks.
No, that was really interesting. And I suppose what is somewhat striking, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I love that your presence in such a space and a phase of people's lives when they're exploring and learning. Academic campuses are such a great place to explore for a young person or at any age to explore, to learn and go deeper, not only in a particular area of vocation, but just learning who you are. And it seems that, and I get, continuing education in my line of work, and we're told that, the young people who are, make up such a population on campus are really looking for meaning and purpose in their work. It's not just about going and learning a skill and studying to get a job or to establish a career. It's to build a life.
Yeah.
And I also, I can't help but think about that, as well as I love the example that you said. I forgot the word. I love what you said about you're co-located, different denominations, different approaches to worshiping God are all co-located. And that's such a powerful example to the world. I guess so. Do you see attrition, or, it seems that less people are going to physical church, or you see the statistics or hear that. So how do you see all of that, and the uniqueness of what you're doing, and setting the example that you're setting?
Yeah, in some ways, it's a very terrifying time to go into grad school and not quite knowing what the job landscape's going to look like in a few years. I have kids who are about to enter college. I'll tell you, it's terrifying for everybody. Everything's
Mhm.
shifting so fast with AI and all that. It's also a very exciting time to enter into a sustained period of study of theological, of spiritual topics. Because there is so much happening energetically, spiritually in the world, and it can be very enriching to just give yourself some time to study and be a scholar and be a learner and engage with different modalities of spiritual approaches. Where was I going with all of that? Yeah, so our students are all going to go off and there's not a single track. There's not a single track, right? People who come and study with us are not all going to be funneled into a factory and come out as ministers of a church somewhere. They're doing different things. We have a student who's going to graduate, and she is already starting her own church. She has an idea for a new form of ministry, particularly ministering to the LGBTQ community in a particular place in which this is needed and called for. We have a student who wants to be a military chaplain. We have a student who is going to go on and do a PhD and continue learning that way. So it's actually quite exciting to have students with such a range of interests and callings in play. And as faculty, we're certainly here to help imagine the horizon of options available after this course of study. And it is exciting to be in a community, in a wider community. It's nice to be our Swedenborgian selves, right? To really be who we are fully in our theological world of Swedenborgian thought. But we are the only Swedenborgian seminary on the planet that is affiliated this way with other institutions of graduate learning, other accredited institutions. And it gives us, not only does it give us stability, but it gives us a sense of connection to a broader discourse. And a relevance to a broader discourse. All of the folks here at the GTU, the faculty and the students and the staff alike, know what it is, know what a Swedenborgian is. They've met and enjoyed partnering, having conversations with Swedenborgians. So it's a wonderful way to be connected outside of our wonderful world of Swedenborgianism.
Mhm. Oh, Rudy has a question. Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I had my camera off because I had I had dental work earlier. So, um, I just wanted to know what would you say, Rebecca, to someone who is maybe in their later years and doesn't have a degree and all the like fancy higher level titles who may want to um, evolve and get involved in the Swedenborgian Church as a minister someday, how intimidating that can be. Like, is how do you even start that process?
We have a lot of second career students. So we are well set up to support students who are coming from decades even in another professional setting. So that's something that, yeah, an older student will feel very at home in a graduate theological union context or in a CSS context. In terms of like entering into like graduate level discourses, everyone who's been through it, we all know the destabilizing first few weeks of learning a new language. It really is learning a new language when you enter into grad school. There's a lot of words floating around, and you need to pull out your dictionary or your whatever tools are for learning a new vocabulary. But it doesn't take long to begin to find your way. And I'll say that this probably is true beyond theological education, but the landscape is also changing in regards to the kinds of studies that you can do. For instance, at the GTU, where I'm sitting, the MA, the Masters of Arts degree, has two tracks. One is academic track, which is a more traditional graduate degree where you write term papers and you produce a thesis at the end. And the other is a practical degree in which you have a project in mind, like starting a certain kind of church or a certain kind of spiritual community, a certain kind of spiritual practice. And instead of the academic track where you're writing a thesis, you're creating a portfolio and you're creating a plan for a project. So that's an example of the diversity of tracks here, that there are alternative tracks arising for a more practical journey than a traditional academic one. We have a number of students doing that.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think the entrepreneurial spirit is alive and well, and I think an interesting part about this theology is, well, we've crafted a when we're talking about Emmanuel Swedenborg, didn't intend to found a new religion or start these things. It's interesting that we're now kind of at a time where kind of that growing edge of kind of being forced to into maybe some of the uh, not quite as comfortable things as going into traditional parish settings is actually a little bit of an asset in that regard to preparing students to kind of be creative in innovative ways and give support. Um, it's interesting. We didn't plan on having our chapel fall into have a landslide, and here we are. We've landed inside an Episcopal church for the time being, and I think it was Reverend Dr. Jonathan Mitchell who coined the term Episcoborgians. But it's where you were talking about the landscape that's out there, it seems to be mirroring in other other places outside of academia. So I mean, I'm excited for any student that's got an idea, because if you're got an entrepreneurial edge and you kind of have some ideas, I mean, I'm just witnessing out there what's happening on the secular side of what people are doing kind of on this spiritual edge. And I think there's a whole lot that can be explored, because we have such rich theology to kind of give you some guidance for the long term on that trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Right. Well, I think we're coming up fairly close to our time and covered all the other things, and maybe this will go into the post-production side. We might end it here, but as a fun thing, I was looking at some of your articles, Rebecca, on whether or not uh, we know for a fact that Emanuel Swedenborg studied Kabbalah.
Oh,
And I do know that Madonna's got a new album coming out soon,
oh,
and she's
really?
still an active practitioner of Kabbalah. So
Okay.
this may this may
Hmm.
be of interest to new Madonna fans. But
Hmm.
is there anything? I mean, people can find your articles. You have a couple out there that are excellent. But any further thoughts? I mean, it sounds like he doesn't straight out say it, which is kind of what you researched. He doesn't
It's
have
a
any.
debated subject because there's so much in Swedenborg's theology that looks and sounds like Kabbalah. Um, so even the Moshe Dell, who is the one of the world premier scholars of Kabbalah, Jewish Kabbalah, he's convinced Swedenborg was a Kabbalist. Because it just looks and sounds like Kabbalah. There's so many similarities. But actually, there's really not a lot of evidence that that's true. Uh, except for the fact that Kabbalah was in the water. That's the best way to put it. It was in the water in Swedenborg's day and in his context, but it was Christianized Kabbalah that he was encountering. Um, so it was through converts to Christianity who, like um, uh, Kemper, Johann Kemper, who was teaching at Uppsala University when Swedenborg was there. He was a Christian convert, he was a convert to Christianity. And this is very often the way historically how Kabbalah made its way into Christian theology was through converts. So we know that Swedenborg was swimming in a water that was heavily influenced by Kabbalah in his context. Whether or not he directly studied any particular text or with any particular Kabbalistic scholar, I don't see any evidence for that. And there are parts of some of the things people point to as evidence can be explained other ways, like Swedenborg's concept of the grand human or the human shape of heaven and the ways that all the different body parts work together as communities in heaven working together the way a body works. Swedenborg was an anatomist. He spent decades studying the human anatomy before he had his spiritual experiences. So whether or not he gets that from Kabbalistic sources or from his own sacred imagination that's been living in the contours of the human body for so long, who knows? But it's a very exciting question for those of us who like comparative theology. It's a fun playground to play in, all of these wonderful mystical ideas in play. Um, certainly a lot of shared symbols and shared ideas.
Yeah, and well, now you got my curiosity going because this is one of those questions too. It's related because, as far as we know, we didn't have much connection to Eastern thought. I mean, one thing that comes to mind was, when you're able to slow down your breathing to enter altered states. It's fairly well known in some of the Vedic texts, yogis, and curious if we know of any connection there to Swedenborg that he may have come across anything there, and if that was in the water somehow.
I mean, again, his breathing technique, which yes, has a lot in common with practices from other parts of the world for sure. Um, but he talks about the origins of that being from childhood. That as a in his youth, he would experiment with his own breathing, and he sort of developed through playing with his breath a practice of calming his breath, slowing his breath to barely any actual movement in and out of his lungs, and finding this a way to kind of slip into a spiritual state of mind or an altered state of consciousness. As somebody, I love, again, comparative theology and these questions of contact. Is contact necessary, historical contact, like contact in time and space, for there to be a common horizon of thought or practice? I don't think so. I mean, I think we're all the time discovering true realities on opposite sides of the globe, discovering truth in different ways. But that doesn't preclude a conversation today between practitioners of Eastern religions and Swedenborgian thought.
Yeah, this is all fascinating stuff, and that brings up the even bigger topic of the non-local consciousness that's
Right.
not going,
Right.
pointing
Right.
the
And as Swedenborgians, we believe that we're not just connected to each other on this plane, right? We're connected to each other on many planes. And so what do we mean by contact? There can be all kinds of contact happening on other levels. Yeah.
Absolutely. So speaking of contact, I think, oh wait, Stephanie's got a question.
Oh,
Go for
actually, you don't have to answer it because we will probably talk about this next Sunday in Exploring New Earth. But Dr. Brown, one of the things that I really love, examples, the framework that you often share is, you can study, break down scientifically the chemical composition of honey, but until you've experienced it, you know, that's kind of like bringing everything together. And especially, in college campuses, how do you manage the two states of being and doing? The doing, the studying, the learning. And then there's a piece, I guess, in religious life of really, being in a state of religious spirituality and consciousness that's shared. So do you approach that at all in the studies, or how does that sort itself out?
Doing versus being. Maybe I'll use biblical imagery because this is our framework as Swedenborgians. So the Bible's full of stories of moving between Canaan and Egypt. And in the Swedenborgian symbol system or correspondences, Canaan is the part of ourself that you might call the being part of us, or the love-centered, celestial, less intellectual, more connected part of ourselves. And Egypt is the intellect. It's the learning, it's the school, it's the training, it's the skill building. And so this movement back and forth is between the celestial and the spiritual, or between the kind of heart-centered being mode and the intellectual-centered spiritual mode. And so the figures in the Bible are always moving back and forth between these two modes. Same thing with the Mount of Olives and the city of Jerusalem. The movement back and forth that Jesus did at the end of his life between these was also that same movement between the celestial, the love, divine love mode, and the divine wisdom mode, or the spiritual. And so I often tell my students, you're in Egypt while you're here. You're in Egypt. We're here to develop your mind. And you'll go back to Canaan. You'll go back out into the world, and you'll move into your calling, to your heart's desire. But you got to sit a little while with us here in the mode of the intellect. Not that there isn't heart-centered modalities in the graduate experience. There is, for sure. But part of what you're here to do is develop your mind.
Thank you. That was a beautiful description and biblical, basis. Thank you.
All right. Well, we're coming up on time, and thank you so much, Rebecca, for our shared time here, and Stephanie, Michael, and Ruby, and for anyone that's going to be visiting this consuming this afterwards. If they have questions, they're inspired by what has been part of this conversation, this theme, how might they contact you if they were interested in following up with something along the lines of inquiries for either graduate level theology or the Center for Swedenborgian Studies? Where would you point them towards?
estersson@gtu.edu is my email address. Or swedenborgianstudies.org is our email address, as our website. So swedenborgianstudies.org, or you can Google Center for Swedenborgian Studies and you will find us.
Perfect. Okay.
And maybe I'll just give a quick plug. We have a brand
Sure.
new, just live last week, digital archive. Our archives and we have a wonderful historical archive in our library, and we've been digitizing material for the last year plus, and the first few collections are now live on our website, and we will be building more. You can access original letters from Helen Keller, Henry James Sr., and lots of other exciting things happening there. So
That is exciting. Okay. So all you budding theologians out there that are looking for something to look forward to and something you can research on your own, you now know where to go. Okay.
all right. See some of you in Boston for convention
Thank you.
in over a month.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.